Many thanks for staying. Welcome back to the marketplace. Now, a strong economic growth rate for any country should always come with some excitement, but it appears that may not be the situation for managers of the economy after the announcement of a 9% economic growth rate recorded this year by the Ghana Statistical Service. The following Business Desk report looks at some of the areas and how they will affect you.
One of the biggest benefits of this historic economic growth could be the impact on the country's rising debt stock. Well, even though in monetary terms the debt stock may be rising and has reached 139 billion cedis as of June this year, after a 1.4 billion cedi jump, economists, development partners would want to look at the size of your economy and how the country has been able to build some assets to absorb these debts. Latest figures from the Bank of Ghana put the debt in relation to the size of our economy at 68%, still below the dreaded 70% mark. But if you add the end-of-year value of 167 to the first half of this year, then it means that the value of the economy in monetary terms is worth 212 billion cedis. But this could put a lot of pressure on government to collect more taxes, as current numbers still show that we are not mobilizing more taxes in relation to the size of our economy. This development could put some pressure on managers of the economy, improve their tax collections or increase taxes to make for the shortfall. Or if they are not prepared to do this, government would have to cut expenditure to help close budget deficit issues.
Meanwhile, economist Dr. Eric Osei CB is warning that with a rising public debt ratio, government must explore other internal means of generating extra revenue. According to the Bank of Ghana, the country's total debt constitutes about 68% of GDP as of June. Now, the International Monetary Fund says the situation is alarming. However, in reaction to this, economist Dr. Eric Osei CB suggests a more prudent measures can be worked out internally to solve the situation.
Of course, public debt is still high. If you compare it to other countries or comparator countries, ours is still high, around 71. We are aiming to get into 71%. Of course, that is not sustainable. But what matters is what are the measures that are being put in place to bring it down. If you have good measures in place, then over a period of time, you are likely to bring it down. The issue is how fast that can be. It will depend on the extent to which the economy is growing and also the extent to which you are able to generate enough revenue so that you resort less and less on borrowing, both externally and domestically. But you cannot immediately bring it down, given the fact that already your revenue side is not doing too well and you have huge expenditure, overhang. Government have to spend on social development, social issues, have to spend on infrastructure and all of that. So you cannot immediately bring it down. But what matters is the management of it. How are you managing the debt situation? And of course, I think it will take a little bit of time to do that. For me, addressing these debt issues boils down to focusing more on domestic revenue mobilization, because there's a extent to which government can reduce its expenditure. Government cannot control or reduce expenditure merely because revenue is not doing well. When it happens consistently like that, it will come back to hurt the economy, and your economy will not be growing or expanding the way you want it. You'll not be able to finance your critical infrastructure. You bear me out that we have very huge infrastructure deficit in this country, road network, schools, and now we have free education and all of that. That really will pose huge fiscal risk on government if the revenue sector is not doing well, and that may push government to have to go and borrow more, and if government is going to borrow more, which sometimes is necessary to maintain the growth momentum of this economy, you will have to borrow, not to bring this economy to ground to a halt. You still have to go and borrow. And so if we really want to cut down on borrowing, then I think much more emphasis should be on how do we generate enough revenue? How do we ensure that the revenue yield is increased, tax yield is increased, tax compliance is increased, tax avoidance reduced, and the tax base is widened, particularly into the informal sector, to make sure that at least everybody pays something to the state, so that the government can also be able to reduce the debt stock. Is critical. Otherwise, there's not going to be any magic wand, or government cannot artificially pull down the debt stock if it's really not, generating enough revenue to finance its critical expenditures.
Now, in another development, Executive Director of the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, ISA, is confident that the trend of growing economic growth rate would be sustainable.
My expectation is that with 10 coming on, we are going to expect an improvement in GDP. As long as there is no interference with oil production, I think we'll be seeing a growth in the GDP, mainly coming from oil and gas. And also with the good news that the issues we sent, the issue we had with Côte d'Ivoire has been resolved. I think it gives us a signal that our expectation will be met in terms of revenue coming from the oil and gas sector.
So probably you think we are getting closer to economic stability?
I mean, economic stability is a process. We cannot just use only this to just conclude. But I think we are working on hoping that we always put everything being equal. We'll keep on having good supply of electricity, and then the private sector will lead in the development. Then we'll expect
Also, let's still stay further on this issue. And the latest figures of the GDP figures revealed that every Ghanaian is now worth 5,911 cedis in terms of per capita calculations. However, that would be the impact when we factor the public debt. It looks like you would be taking home just 1,278 cedis. So should we review the way we gauge impact of growth on the population? There are even suggestions that we should be using a new model termed the Happiness Index. Let's hear from acting government statistician Ban Wadier.
Yeah, we've indicated that the economy has grown or is growing. And when the economy is growing, particularly faster than the population growth, you expect that per capita the GDP per capita will also go up. And that is what we are witnessing. But this per capita is devoid of equity in the distribution of the wealth of the nation. What the per capita is indicating is that if the entire wealth or the GDP is distributed equally to the entire population or to every person in the population, then that is what each person will get.
There's been a school of thought about us reviewing this and looking at even happiness index and all the rest. I don't know what you make of it.
These are all measures, but the value of GDP and per capita cannot be eroded. It gives a quick idea or a quick impression as to how, assuming we distribute the wealth equally, each person will get. But having said that, we know that the GDP is not distributed equally. There are inequalities in the distribution, and we believe that if the economy should expand, there could be measures put in place to address inequalities in the distribution of the GDP.
Away from that, President of the Ghana Association of Bankers, Alhassan Andani, has endorsed the proposed downgrading of banks that don't meet the new capital levels. Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Ernest Addison, has indicated that banks that don't want to recapitalize could look at taking up savings and loans licenses. But the governor's stance has not gone down well with some players in the industry who are worried that this would affect the extension of credit to businesses by these specialized banks. Meanwhile, Alhassan Andani disagrees.
the banking sector is a regulated industry. The regulator, who is the Bank of Ghana, has now determined the condition upon which they will give a universal banking license, which is a 400 million Ghana cedi minimum capital. It's a message that we carry to our boards and our shareholders. And for the shareholders that still think that they can still have a good return on equity on 400 million, will stay in the market. And I'm sure it's also time for shareholders with similar market appetite and business inclination to begin to engage. And we in management and leadership will, begin to simulate what the future will look like, in terms of partnerships and things like that. But again, for most of the banks that are now joining, they are coming up from the loans and savings arena, and they've already got expertise there, and they are profitable sectors as well. So yes, it's still an option, that those who are not prepared to step up to the universal license, we should take. And the governor has been quite persistent about that.
Over the past few weeks, we've engaged several players in the banking sector who argue that this one-size-fits-all, approach by the regulator is not going to help in any way, and that the regulator will have to consider the strengths of these banks regarding the minimum capital requirements. But the regulator is still insisting that this is going to be the way forward. Do you still stand by this argument of the one-size-fits-all?
Look, when you say one size fits all, we have to be very careful. What is the minimum size?
Let's now turn our attention to the aviation industry. And the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority has justified its decision to caution the public on their dealings with two new airlines. This was after representatives of the two airlines went ahead to advertise scheduled flights without the required approvals by the authority. But one of the airlines, Gold Star, has rejected Ghana Civil Aviation Authority's claims, describing it as an attempt to tarnish its image. But the Director General of the Civil Aviation Authority, Simon Alote, tells Joy Business they stand by the action.
Processes for obtaining the air operator certificate includes a pre-application stage, a formal application, evaluation of documents, demonstration and inspection phase, and the final certification phase. But according to the regulator, the two airlines are yet to complete these processes. In an interaction with Joy Business, Director General for the GCAA, Simon Alote, cautioned the public against dealing with the two operators for now.
Any prospective operator who has not completed certification or is attempting to sell tickets or advertise various destinations needs to be carefully looked at. It may be a scam, and we will advise the general public to be very careful or be wary of such operators. And also, before an airline operates from Ghana to any other country, it has to be properly designated to fly to that country. By designation, it means the Republic of Ghana, through the Ministry of Aviation and Foreign Affairs, will write to their counterparts in the second country, indicating that they will want this particular airline to fly out to their country. And the second state will then examine the various documentation attached to the application, including the air operator certificates, manuals, insurance for the aircraft, and so on. They will undertake a safety assessment. Once they are happy, then they grant approval for the airline to operate. So one does not simply get up like a taxi driver and say, I'm operating Accra Osu today. You don't do that. You just can't fly to any country. You have to first apply for designation. And the airlines which are advertising various routes have not even gotten to the stage of AOC where they can then qualify to apply for designation.
The Civil Aviation Authority says it will soon publish the list of all airlines that have appropriate approvals to operate in the country.
In due course, we're going to publish the list of airlines in Ghana which have our air operator certificate, AOC, so that the public will be aware and be advised accordingly.
The Ghana Civil Aviation Authority is, however, in talks with the two airlines to rectify the issue.
We're still live on the marketplace. Moving on, Deputy Energy Minister Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam says calls for government to remove taxes on petroleum products are in line with the MPP's agenda for the industry. He explains that government has already taken initial steps to reduce the burden on consumers by abolishing the petroleum excise levy and reducing the special petroleum tax to 15%, as comments announced by the finance minister during the 2017 budget. His comments come on the back of recent hikes in petroleum prices. He says government at the moment does not determine prices of petroleum products because of the deregulation agenda.
But the reality, as we see today, is that neither the government as an executive nor NPA as the regulator have responsibility for fixing petroleum product prices. They are determined by the market forces. Demand, supply, forex, depreciation, for instance, is a factor, and also international crude oil prices. They are all factors that determine the prices of petroleum products on the market. Now, what government has control over are the taxes. And I imagine people calling on government to withdraw the taxes or reduce the taxes so that the prices of petroleum products will also come down. And this is consistent with what the MPP government did since we came into government. We realized that product prices, even though global oil prices came down and through the deregulation, product prices also went down, we still found that to be relatively higher. And so we decided to do something about it. And so in our first budget, we abolished excise tax, which has been a long-standing tax on petroleum products. It took a bold government for the first time to abolish the excise tax on petroleum products. Not only this, we also reduced the special petroleum tax, which was imposed on petroleum product prices by the previous government in 2016. We reduced it from 17.5% to 15%. And so we recognize that we do not control the market and therefore prices, but we can do something about taxes. And these were the reasons why government decided to rather tackle the part which government had control over in the pricing of petroleum products. And so we have done already so much to bring the prices down so that we all understand the context within which you see price increasing. And also to understand that government does not determine product prices any longer since price deregulation started last year. What we can do is to moderate the taxes. And this year we've already moderated the taxes by abolishing one tax, that is the excise tax, and by reducing the second tax, the special petroleum tax, from 17.5% to 15%. I believe that government is considering other factors.
But the energy think tank Institute for Energy Security, IES, has described the reduction in taxes by government as woefully inadequate. Principal Research Officer Richmond Roxon has been responding to assertions by the Deputy Minister, Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam, that government has fulfilled its promise of doing something about prices by reducing the prices in the system. Mr. Roxon still believes these are excessive.
The government is supposed to abolish the 15% levy or tax, special petroleum tax alone. We're going to see a reduction of 0.66 pesos. That will mean that by abolishing that alone, fuel prices per litre will come down to 3.7. That is how significant it is. So if you're going to reduce fuel prices from 4.41 to 3.7 by abolishing one tax, one special petroleum tax, you can imagine the effect they're going to see if we look at the other components. We think that the road fund is too much, 40 pesos is too much, increase from about 7 pesos to 40 pesos. That was over 400%. The government should be able to review it downward. If it's 20 pesos, we think it will be okay. We think that the price stabilization and recovery levy, we think that it's also not important, especially with the current regulation that we are practicing. The government will make the argument that we should be looking at premix because we still pay for an recovery for premix. But I don't think that it's fair that when a major product, that's petroleum product for gasoline and gas oil challenge about it, but we consistently use the monies for premix. So we, in our opinion, we don't think that the government should still maintain that. There are other taxes and levies that we think it shouldn't be there. The toll levy is still part of the energy debt recovery. we are still paying toll levy of 8 pesos on every litre we buy after paying this levy for over 10 years. I think it's about time government account for how much it has accrued, how much it has paid, so we look at abolishing this, because we can't use these taxes and levies as an avenue for government raising revenue.
Richmond Roxon, the Principal Research Officer of the Institute for Energy Security, was sharing those thoughts earlier this morning on Joy News Desk. Now, traveling around the city, the Joy Business Van has encountered very promising Ghanaian businesses whose potential can be further developed should they be supported. In this edition of the Joy Business Van, we come to you from the just ended Joy Prime Made in Ghana Fair, where we engage some entrepreneurs to learn about how they are keeping up with the market. Here's a repeat of the Joy Business Van.
Najiman, Io Date, Deborah Ednam, 3 entrepreneurs who caught our attention at the Joy Prime Made in Ghana Fair. Harrison is owner of Volta Wineries and produces wine from cocoa, cashew, and coffee. He learned how to make wine while he was studying in Scotland 5 years ago.
Over there, I learned that we were making wine from strawberry, blackcurrants, and all the fruits they have, not the grape. So I noticed that it is possible to make wine from fruits other than grape. And I first tried the banana wine, then an idea occurred to me that if you can make wine from those fruits, then you can also make wine from cocoa.
Iodate tells me he was discovered by his first grade teacher. He loved to paint and decided to make that his profession.
As you can see, the works I have here are things we can relate to in our community. That's, you can see the bone shaker, the old Bedford. Okay. And most of the institutions you see on them are the stories of the drivers that they want to express, and so they just put it in the phrase. As you can see, why worry? No pain, no gain, time will tell.
Deborah, well, she transformed a hobby to what has become Wear Africa, a promising fashion accessories brand.
Those days I used bamboo, and I realized people love them, especially my mom. She loved them, and people, although I don't sell them, by the way people looked at them, there was one man who advised me, why don't I go into this beading, because I'm really good. Well, and I realized, in fact, I had the talent, so let me do something. I started it, and everything went well. I didn't even learn it anyway, it's natural.
So, 3 Ghanaian entrepreneurs passionate about what they do and poised to put Ghana on the international map. But wait a minute, even locally, it's quite a struggle. They have to grapple with many issues: funding, foreign competition, and production challenges.
We don't have packaging materials locally, so you have to import packaging materials from abroad. And when you are a small business operating, it means that your unit cost of the packaging will be high, and that puts up your cost.
The most depressing is what appears to be the huge appetite of locals for everything or most things foreign. That, of course, started the Made in Ghana campaign, an initiative by government, past and successive, to get Ghanaians to choose Ghana-made products first. We are not where we want to be, but it appears the campaign may be working.
It used to be very challenging, but in the last 3 years, it started picking up because some of our institutions, like the banks and other corporate institutions, started patronizing us. So, for instance, you can go to Stanbic Heights, you can see my work there. I was fortunate to have Frankie's Hotel. You can go there, you can see my paintings in their corridor, their hotel rooms and all that. So gradually it is picking up.
The entrepreneurs recognize they've got a lot of work to do on their side, especially with producing quality products and branding them to match up with foreign ones. That is where Harrison is investing his money.
We believe we should make a perfect product, and we've been trying and playing with this for some time. Currently, we believe our products are perfect, but initially we were having some challenges, and we have to be doing a lot of research. So you are not able to turn in profit or acquire funding to put into the business.
The future looks brighter, speaking to these entrepreneurs, but they say aside from putting in place conducive measures for them to operate, the campaign for patronage of made-in-Ghana products should be intensified. It shouldn't be just words, but backed with action.
If I'm working in a government institution, I go to office and I see paintings and it's nice. I would love to have it in my home. So when people their work is getting closer to the people will have love for it, definitely.
The ambition to match up with foreign counterparts could one day become a reality. At least Deborah believes that.
I have people that buy my things and sell uptown. I have a lot of people that do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
People buy the things, they put their brand on it. You know, I take my money, they put their brand on it, and you think it's theirs. But people that know me see that and say, oh, no, this is from Royal Africa.
The foreigners who have seen her products here in Ghana really like them. And one day, well, someday soon, she is certain she would be exporting most of her fashion accessories.
Get the Joy Business Van every Wednesday evening on 5 p.m. on the Business Live show. It's now time to take a look at an investment tip courtesy gov't Finance.
Investment Tips is brought to you by gov't Finance, deposits, investments, borrowings, and advisory.
The modified life cycle and investing prime work life. In your prime working years, you're likely to spend less than you earn. This stage is most ideal for more savings and investment. Remember to increase the amount of your investments consistently during this period. If not, the ideal situation should be 60% of your income could be on living expenses, food, shelter, and clothing, 15% on debt repayments, 10% on charity, donations, or religious activities, 10% into savings or investment portfolio, 3% on insurance needs if required by circumstances, and 2% on others.
Investment Tips was brought to you by gov't Finance, deposits, investments, borrowings, and advisory.
All right, so time to go now, and I hope you did enjoy the show this afternoon. Thank you so much for your company. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji. Good afternoon.